I'm doing this just for fun. I believe that the way we are reacting to the elections in the US, we meaning the climate community, shows how difficult it is even for us to think about building resilience. We are in the business of telling humanity about climate action, the dangers of climate change, climate crisis, and resilience, and yet I'm not sure we are being very smart about building resilience against perturbations, political perturbations to climate action. And some indicators point out why. This nice article from the Telegraph is what I'm going to use. It says the left is more unpopular than any time since the Cold War, except in Starmer's Britain. Starmer won the elections in the UK recently. How long he will last is unclear, but anyway, Hillary Clinton, who didn't do so well in the elections, well, she lost, was blamed of not being able to listen to people, which, true, because she assumed that the candidate or the other candidate was just not serious, that people will not trust him, believe him, and so on. And she made some decisions on which state to visit during the election, just before the election, and so on. She lost, okay, and she was not happy. And then she wrote this article now in March 28, 2025, after some scandal broke out about some war plans being discussed on Signal, commercial chat group, chat app. And she says, Hillary Clinton says, how much dumber will this get? So that's the focus of her article about how this administration is being stupid or dumb, and she asks how much dumber will this get. The problem, again, as already pointed out by some people who wrote letters in response to Hillary Clinton's article, is that she's not really offering any solutions as such. She's just taking this opportunity to say, these people are not doing smart things. But considering how dividing a figure she is, and not really being sure of what the impact of her words are, New York Times is a liberal newspaper. It wants to carry such articles, or they want clickbaits, so this article will get a lot of hits, I'm sure. So what is the role of climate change, climate action, liberals all together in terms of what support you can get from the public? So the US is where this plays out a lot. Lots of surveys are carried out by Pew Charitable Foundation, Yale 360, and so on. And there are lots of papers talking about how conservatives deal with climate change. It's not like they are unaware or unsure of the information, but somehow they feel the value systems of what is being preached in terms of climate change, climate action, is inconsistent with their own value systems. And there is some survey that says if private sector gets involved in climate change mitigation, mitigating their own emissions as well, then conservatives are happier. In other words, it's a very complicated issue. But I wrote an article saying that tunnel visions can lead to, I don't know if it's a problem, but democracy can pick anybody, and they pick people like Donald Trump because Americans are so divided that a single sacred value, be it free speech, politeness, or climate action, blinds them to all other concerns. So, the political correctness, DEI, all kinds of issues were raised as just untenable, and climate change tends to fall in that trap as well. And most climate scientists tend to be liberal. Democrats tend to believe more in climate change than Republicans. In the US, outside it plays out differently, but in the end, the actual action, how to bring about support for action, is not really dependent on what you believe. It comes down to economy, the pocketbook, how willing people are to pay taxes, etc. Or if you tell them renewables are going to cost less, they will be very happy to invest in renewables, not worrying about whether that's a climate action or not, and so on and so forth. So we have to always keep this complexity of human mind in mind, including all the standard biases like confirmation bias, negativity bias, and so on and so forth. So I thought I'll just read this article because it is also using some data. The left is more unpopular than any time since the Cold War, except in Starmer's Britain. Right-wing groups emerged as global winners after more than 1.5 billion voted in over 70 countries last year. So imagine that it's not just the US, the world is tilting towards the right, and the left is more unpopular than any time since the Cold War. So we'll just read some text. The analysis is interesting. Average party voter share per year in terms of percentage growing from 1990 to 2020. Left wing went up from being lower in the 1990s, crossed over, and then it has crashed, whereas the right wing, which was the winning most of the more votes than the left wing, crashed a little bit, and then it has come back and maybe even headed up. And we'll look at which countries are we talking about. This is Lula from Brazil, Kamala Harris, Pierre Trudeau, and we'll come back to this African country, and Hungary and various Austria, etc. Left-wing parties are more unpopular now than any time since the end of the Cold War, the Telegraph has assessed. The analysis comes after a year of election triumphs for conservatives around the world, crowned by Donald Trump's election as the US president. Right-wing groups emerged as the worldwide winners after more than 1.5 billion people voted in more than 70 countries in 2024, the most on record in a single year. Leftist parties suffered a record low average vote share of just 45.4% in each democracy's latest election, according to Telegraph analysis of elections in 73 democracies. In Western Europe and the US, left-wing parties secured just 42.3% of the vote, while the right won 55.7%, which represents the widest gap in vote share since 1990. Before I go forward, just to make sure, my main point will be that we climate scientists, especially in the US, have also been hammering the worst of the news, almost reaching alarmist levels, calling it climate crisis, while we continue to live a absolutely ordinary, if not good life, worrying about our own salaries, awards, wealth, kids, college, retirement, etc. But we keep saying we're in a crisis. Is that contradictory? Well, obviously, if there is a crisis, then you should be living like it's a crisis. So we are not leading by example. But the other thing is that left wing in the US, according to my own thinking, is simply not listening to the people who are unhappy. When Trump won in 2016, we thought maybe that was just a mistake or something, and when he lost in 2020, we thought he went away, or I don't know what we thought. 2024, he came roaring back with winning popular vote and electoral colleges and so on in the US. And in 2016, we said, oh, he didn't win the popular vote, Hillary won, blah blah blah. But fact is, we didn't prepare, and we didn't make any effort to understand why people vote for someone like Trump at all. It's easy to dismiss him as some kind of a freak that is outside the normal behavior in politics also, but fact is, people vote for him, and unless we understand, this problem is not going to be solved. And it's the same for climate change. If climate change is an issue and some people simply don't want to accept it, then they may oppose any investments in adaptation, mitigation, resilience, all of which are going to cost money, and they will hit people's pocketbooks in terms of taxes, etc. And there were some efforts under Biden to make climate action as a job creator and so on and so forth, but there were many other reasons why he lost. Nonetheless, global demise of the political left, average voter share per year in percentage, left-wing parties again. So here, global average vote share of the left hit 45.4% in 2024, the lowest since 1990, whereas the right-wing parties have gone up. And this is slightly differently presented than here. This is average party vote share, whereas here it's the average vote share of the left and right. Meanwhile, the hard right scored a record high vote share of 14.7% after radical politicians performed well in elections from France to Panama. The left's demise can even be charted in Latin America, a stronghold of socialism after years of brutal fascist dictatorships. After Mr. Trump's inauguration this month, that was in January, further defeats are expected to be inflicted on the left in Canada, Australia, and Germany, the EU's largest economy. So Canada is going to have elections soon. The trend is up. There is no real reason to expect that it will stop anytime soon. Professor Matthijs Rudin, a political scientist from the University of Amsterdam, says. Jeremy Cliff, the editorial director and senior policy fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations think tank, said the global turn to the right was the result of three interconnected trends: the globalization-driven decline of organized labor, rising identity politics harnessed more successfully by the right than the left, and a general tendency among the left forces to fragment rather than unite. This is what climate scientists have to worry about. Are we a force that is uniting, or are we fragmenting, saying we know what we are talking about, we don't care if you don't believe, we don't care why you don't believe, we don't care why we are just dismissive, and that can be a problem, right? Trump and the West, average vote share per year, left-wing parties here, left obtained 42.3% in the West, and right has gone up, obtained 55.7%. Okay, so the countries included here: Austria, Belgium, Canada, Cyprus, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Iceland, Ireland, Italy, Luxembourg, Malta, Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, United Kingdom, and of course the United States. So we are missing something in terms of just listening to what's happening. Mr. Trump won the popular vote in November's US election, taking 77 million votes compared to 75 million for Democrat Kamala Harris. So he won the popular vote. Polls show Pierre Poilievre, a populist dubbed Canada's Trump, is the favorite to replace Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister after the Liberal in Australia. After the Liberal, I cut off something here, sorry about that. In Australia, Conservatives have pulled ahead of the Labour government in the polls before elections later this year. Right-wing parties in Europe opened up a near historic gap with the leftist rivals of nearly 14% in the most recent elections. Labour's landslide victory in the UK was the sole solace for the left in a bruising 12 months of setbacks. I'm not really telling you why this is happening. Neither is the Telegraph, except for the guess made by political scientists, policy fellow. So Jeremy Cliff, the editorial director and senior policy fellow. Sorry, I'm getting. Never mind. So he's guessing that it's the globalization, identity politics, and the tendency among left forces to fragment than unite. Okay, so where was I? So here, this is Pierre Poilievre, has been dubbed Canada's Trump, and he might win. Its success could be short-lived. The first year of YouGov Times voting intention survey voting intentions survey since the 2024 general election shows a neck-and-neck race between Labour with 26% and Reform UK 25%. The Conservative Party sits in the third place with 22%. So you can see they are relatively close in a statistical significance test. This may not come out as statistically significant differences. Nigel Farage's party took 14% of the vote in the election and the third largest share. However, the equivalent of 4.1 million votes only translated into 5 seats in Westminster. So we are dealing really with the fractionated community. In 2024, the Labour Party only obtained 1.6% of percent points more of the vote than it did in 2019, so they have not made any great headway in terms of convincing people. In Western Europe, the hard right was on the march, posting a record average vote share of 16.9% after votes held in France, Austria, Germany, and elsewhere. So voters across the EU handed overall victory to centre-right parties in June's European Parliament elections, but the alternatives for Germany, France's National Rally, and Austria's Freedom Party also celebrated big gains. Emmanuel Macron's decision to call snap assembly elections after Marine Le Pen's National Rally won the EU vote in France left French politics in disarray, and Mr. Macron a lame duck president. Okay, so basically Marine Le Pen just got convicted of embezzlement and is likely to be banned for running for the election in 27, I think. So we don't know where it will go, but Mr. Macron made a calculation and didn't expect what happened. National Rally was only kept from seizing power by a ragback coalition of the left-wing parties, but Ms. Le Pen's party is the single largest in the assembly and brought down the new minority government after just 3 months. In Austria, the far-right pro-Putin Freedom Party won the general election for the first time and is now expected to form a coalition government. So you can see people are really going crazy. Alice Weidel is the co-leader of Germany's far-right AfD party, and I'm not saying people are crazy in that sense, that people are going crazy with what to expect. It's like a whiplash. Something happens, something else happens. A coalition party forms a government, but a bigger conservative party brings it down. In the US, there is a lot of things happening that you can't even keep up with what's happening every day, and lots of court cases. So where it will end up after all the courts are done, and whether the president will care about what the courts have to say. So it's playing out in a very strange way, especially for a country like the US, which has established a long tradition of smooth operations of the government. In Germany, the conservative CDU is expected to win February's general election. I think they did. The far-right AfD is polling in second, ahead of the unpopular left-wing Chancellor Olaf Scholz's Social Democratic Party. Last year, the AfD won a state election, the first far-right party to do so in Germany since the Second World War and fall of the German Nazi Party. 2024 was the worst year for left-wing parties in Central and Eastern Europe since they became democracies after the fall of the Iron Curtain. The center-right won in Croatia and Bulgaria. The far-right won the now partially annulled elections in Romania, so that's still unstable there. And if you look at former Iron countries leaning right, then over time you have left have slumped to 38.7% and right has obtained 50.5% in 2024. So right has obviously made headway in that sense. In the Czech Republic, Andrej Babis, I don't know how it's pronounced, sorry, a populist far-right businessman who has sought to emulate Mr. Trump, is expected to win elections this year. The latest poll shows his party taking 33% of the vote compared to the left-wing runner-up at 19%. Experts said the success of the populist right was down to hardening attitudes against immigration in Europe. In US, this is a big issue as well. Radical policies were also increasingly being normalized after they were poached by establishment conservatives, they said. Professor Rudwin, again from Amsterdam, said hard-right parties were increasingly professionalizing. Social media has also made it far easier for outsider politicians to communicate directly with the citizens. The left's stranglehold on Latin American politics since the late 2000s has weakened after victories by leaders such as Argentina's Javier Milei. After elections in 2024, the left's vote share stood at 51.6%, the lowest in more than 30 years. The right's average vote has held at 40% since 2018. Okay, so my main point again is to say that nobody is listening to anybody, and climate scientists have to figure out whether they can really achieve resilience in funding for the research for climate action. Very few climate scientists will be really pushing for climate action funding, in the sense saying that we know enough from climate science side, now put all the money into adaptation and mitigation. Are we really going to do that? I don't think so. We keep publishing more papers, IPCC assessments, getting ready for the next phase. So we are obviously protecting in many ways our own funding as well. So we are lobbying for ourselves in explicit and implicit ways. But coming back to here, Latin America's left-wing politics are weakened. So again, shows still getting some majority, but weakened significantly over the last few years. But right wings have kind of stayed steady, but crept up a little. So this has to to be seen how it plays out. Here is President Trump with Argentina's chainsaw-wielding Mr. Milei. And they are allies, of course. In 2023, Paraguay elected the conservative Santiago Peña, and Ecuador picked center-right candidate Daniel Noboa. The same year, the chainsaw-wielding Mr. Milei, an ally of Mr. Trump, became president of Argentina with promises to slash public sectors. So they have, chainsaw wielding basically means start cutting welfare programs, public spending, public sector spending, and so on. And that could hack through investments in climate action as well, transportation, etc., which are good for the climate and so on. He will face midterm elections in 2025, but so far his party is performing well in the polls, which means he may get elected again. According to Dr. Christopher Sabatini, a senior research fellow in Latin America, US, and the Americas program at Chatham House, leftist parties have seen their vote share decline as a result of governing inaptitude, overpromises, and corruption. Okay, so still, why am I talking about this in the climate course or climate lectures, climate podcasts? Is because we have so much to learn from these as to how we message climate change and the need for action, right? In the last 2 decades, voters' concerns over crime and violence have shot up. That's an area in which the left has failed to produce any results or viable answers. So if climate change is making life worse, creating conflicts, displacements, immigrants, and then immigrants bring other problems, then it's all connected. So climate change is never really a proximal cause for the complex political situations, but can be an ultimate cause, and not necessarily local either. It can be from far away. So wildfires in the US, droughts, floods, what does it mean? Hurricanes, etc. People don't want to hear that that's climate change, but climate change scientists will keep on yelling that it's all climate change. We keep on doing attributions, saying the event was made 39% more probable. What? Come on. So Jair Bolsonaro, the Trump of the tropics, lost elections in 2022, but his party remains the largest in the Brazilian parliament. Latin America has traditionally been approached by the US with a hands-on interventionist attitude, but the presence of more right-wing and populist leaders will change that. It's going to be a much more partisan policy favoring, if you will, mini Trumps, Dr. Sabatini said. The right maintained its grip on politics in Asia and Australia with a vote share of 55.6%, its highest average since 2017. Some more data showing the right wing tilting up. So the right maintains its grip on politics in Asia and Australia as well. Modi is mentioned here. The right maintained its grip on politics in Asia and Australia with a vote share of 55.6%, its highest average since 2017. Jacinda Ardern, New Zealand's left-wing premier, resigned in 2023 and was replaced by Christopher Luxon, leader of centre-right National Party. In Australia, the right-wing Liberal National Coalition has pulled ahead in the polls before an election this year, and so on. Narendra Modi here, India's world's largest democracy. In India, the world's largest democracy, Narendra Modi and the Bharatiya Janata Party were elected for a third time in June, and they continue to win state elections as well. The opposition centrist and centre-left Indian National Congress coalition did see an increase in voter share. However, lack of leadership on the opposition is a big factor as well. BJP's share of seats did drop, but as a result of the pre-election deals with coalition parties, they did form the government, and of left-wing reign in Africa and the Middle East as well. Left-wing parties saw their vote share drop below 55% for the first time in since 2004 in Africa and the Middle East. So it's not just the rich countries, but the right-wing also has seen a drop here. I won't read all of the details, but you get the sense. Benjamin Netanyahu's right-wing party, Likud, has been in power in Israel since 2020, but that's a very complicated situation with the war going on. I don't think there'll be elections anytime soon. Is Britain really bucking the trend? Labour's landslide victory in the UK was one of the few triumphs for Britain. I am not subscribed. I'm subscribed to a weekly digest which keeps coming, but when I went to read this article, it gave me most of it, but then put this reminder for me that I have to buy subscription. So the Conservative Party is close behind though, and as we saw before, the margins are so small that they will not pass any statistical significance tests. The poll comes 6 months after the 2024 general election, which saw Sir Keir Starmer put into power. Only a slim majority, 54% of Labour's voters, continue to say that they would back his party in another election. Okay, so I'm obviously combining different things, but I am really worried that we are not learning our lessons, that after first Trump term, we didn't prepare well enough for a potential second term. I don't know what we expected, but now that he's in power and is doing certain things, we are mostly crying. I'm not sure there is a concerted effort to protect observations, predictions, projections if they are needed, or at least change to decadal predictions, my favorite spiel, anyway. So can we have a global effort to do climate predictions so that regional perturbations are not a big factor? I've written an article on that as well that you can look up, but this is obviously kind of a commentary rather than a real science podcast, but nonetheless, I think the topic is important enough. Climate scientists really need to worry about how they put out the message. There are a lot of experts who say I'm a communicator, and I've watched some of the big name communicators for decades now, and I'm still not convinced that they are reaching somebody outside the choir, so they are mostly preaching to the choir. Feels good every time we get invited. It's people who want to hear, and people who don't want to hear don't want to invite us, but we cannot just I got cut off there, but we just do not want to dismiss people or be condescending or patronizing, which tends to happen, or at least people feel that way, that when they don't agree with scientists, they are treated like idiots. And obviously Democrats haven't been listening to the people who were unhappy in 2016. In 2020, it's not like all the problems were forgotten. All those things continued, and 2025, the 2024 election showed us that we still haven't really addressed the issues of most people who are unhappy with the system, and climate change is part of that unhappiness as well. So just hammering people on the head with climate change messages will not work. and we should be aware of that and fine-tune our messages without sacrificing science. Sometimes the kind of statements people make, climate scientists make, I wonder if they are constrained by science at all, but that's for another day.